everyone. It's Crystal Swearingen with Crystal Spot Podcast. I'm super excited today to introduce you to my guest, Wysteria Edwards. Thanks for being on the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Just a little bit about Wysteria. She is changing the way we live with attachment, attunement, and intention. And if you guys paid attention to the magazine this year, you know my word for the year is intentionality, because we all need that in our life.
It was mine for 3 years. Don't worry. That word was mine for 3 years.
Consistency has been my word too, but I had to change it up because I didn't get that one.
You can have a new one. We'll just kind of, okay, I get it.
Part of that thing. She's a respected kindergarten teacher in Eastern Washington who's perfected the art of creating a classroom filled with care, hope, and healing. And we do love our educators. Thank you for what you do. Man, it's hard work. Her passion for teaching even led her to gain access to Mr. Rogers' personal papers and to write the groundbreaking book, Waiting for Mr. Rogers, Teaching with Attachment, Attunement, and Intention. How cool is that? Mr. Rogers is like such a big part of most of our life. Well,
he was.
I age myself, but you know, for the young people.
Okay.
I'm super excited to know more about your perspectives on relationship changing, educational practices, adversity, developmental trauma. She's also the visionary behind Simple and Deep TM.
Well, yeah, we're in the process of doing it's a trademark. So we're in the process of registering. So you put TM before you get the little R with the circle, right? We're in that process.
And it's a process. And I knew it had been trademarked, but you know, a lot of our readers or listeners are business people that have not gone through that process of trademarking. So if you want to, maybe we can at some point just kind of touch on how difficult that is.
It is difficult, but I found the greatest attorney ever. So if people want to know, they can get a hold of me and I will send you his way. And I hope that he gives me a nice big fat check for that, right?
Referral. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. No, I just love him. He was wonderful. He really took me through that process and it was pretty painless, right? You just have to identify what you're going to sell. And that's the big thing. Right.
And I think so many of us women give away our intellectual property because we don't know how to protect it. And so I love that. So,
yes.
And so your company is all about empowering women to comprehend insecure attachment through engaging stories and intentional living. So that's a mouthful and that's a lot. And can you solve all of my problems like in these 20, 30 minutes?
Well, I think I love that you first and foremost said, like, intention. I think that is what actually drew me into this whole process of understanding attachment because even when we talk about Fred Rogers, if you were to watch the Morgan Neville documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor, or my friend Maxwell King wrote the biography called The Good Neighbor, work of life of Fred Rogers, which I highly recommend. Max is a wonderful human being, but also spent about 10 years in the archive researching all of, and also knew Fred Rogers when he worked with the Pittsburgh Foundation. But it started with a picture of, one of the things that I keyed in on when I listened to the book, which LeVar Burton from Reading Rainbow reads it, which is even better.
Yes.
So is just the intentionality of Fred Rogers as a practitioner of childhood development and all of those kind of things. I think that he never missed the mark when it came to being intentional, very, very careful when it came to working with children and families. And he answered every letter he ever received by hand or had, so if you wrote him when you were 3, 4, 5, they would have them actually put together. And so he would talk to you. Crystal, do you remember when you went to preschool and you took your favorite blanket? Do you remember when your dog died and you wrote to me? So like he would actually key in on those life experiences. And then fast forward into life, people still have those. So just the intentionality of that. I mean, one of the only times that his staff ever saw him mad was when he threw away, or he didn't, but a bag of mail got thrown away. So he knew he wasn't going to be able to respond to it. So what we saw was really who he was. And so that is such, it's also when I went looking for, I didn't know what I was looking for at first when I started researching, and I just ended up looking for the humanity. Like, how is it that he would be able to do what he did over and over again? And it's really intention, having your intention set, right?
I think that's great because I think the human piece of that misses so much because we get so focused on what's for me, and he's intentional on how he was going to impact the viewers, the people who participated in the show. And I still remember when he kind of crossed the color lines when he had a African-American person on the show.
Francois Clemens, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what
And he
a
washed his feet. I mean, not
yeah,
only to be Jesus to him, but that was when
exactly.
they were integrating swimming pools. And so
Mhm.
he also, not only was he a person of color, but he was a person of authority. He was a police officer. And so
Yeah,
that is significant. And then they reduplicated that moment again in the early 2000s before Fred actually retired. But I think that people don't realize until they really look at it a little bit deeper is the fact that Fred was incredibly radical and very complex as a human being, as
mhm,
well as an educator and a radical thinker when it came to how he saw children, that children have um, big worlds and big feelings within them. And up to that point, people really didn't think about what was going on in the inside of a child. And as we talk about business, life, all of those kind of things that matter to you here and to me as well, we have to remember the children we were because they are still with us.
yeah,
That goes into attachment. So that is why I think it applies to every facet of our life, because wherever we go, that child, those experiences, those developmental traumas go with us into wherever we are, right?
yes. I love it. You're right, because a lot of times when I do vision boards with my daughters every year, and they're
Oh,
getting
absolutely.
older, so they're transitioning out of being my babies to being young women, but I'm gonna allow that to happen again.
I know, it's okay.
But one of the things I've taught them from a very young age is just to dream. Like, use your
Yes.
imagination, like, if you could do anything. I grew up in a very harsh environment, I grew up in I'm aging myself again, but I grew up in the '80s when drugs were prevalent and gangs and
Mhm.
drive-bys and all the things, and the only way I was able to escape was my childlike imagination, and I kept that, and I just had to imagine what my future could be, and
Yes.
I think that
Yes.
you're right, the traumas can go with you. I haven't healed from everything,
Mhm.
but I still can figure out how I can live my life intentional today by
Yeah.
making different choices every single day. So
That's
um, I
beautiful.
I think that's so important. So what is the element of attunement that you focus in your training?
Well, so if we go back a little bit to the idea of attachment, you think about a
Mhm.
child, an infant that comes into this world, they have everything that they possibly need, right? They don't come in with insecurities or
Yeah.
fears. They just trust that whoever is at the end of a cry is going to come help them and give them what they need. And what's hard about life is that we live in a broken, fallen world, right? So people bring everything they are into the moment that they're in. And so if I have not been parented well and I haven't had my needs met, I'm going to have a harder time giving and receiving love. So what happens is it's an exchange. An infant cries, the mother comes, or the caregiver.
Mhm.
Most of the time, it's the mother, right? They'll nurse the baby, give the baby a bottle, give them a fresh diaper. They'll soothe them, they'll hold them, they'll swaddle them. All of the things that make good parenting of a newborn, right? They soothe them, and so children pick up on our nervous system, and so we actually impart our feelings. So how many of us have ever gone into a room and something has happened and we just sense it? Like
Yes.
something just happened. I came in too late. Somebody like something bad just happened, or somebody said something, or something like somebody's crying, and you're like, what happened? Like I just left the room and now I came back and something's wrong. So it's
Chaos.
children get really, yeah, children get really good at reading the environment, and they know whether or not they're wanted. They know whether or not that they're going to get their needs met very, very quickly. And so within the first several years of our lives, we are imprinting, our brain is growing so much. So attunement is really about, as a caregiver, being able to walk into the emotional experience of another and hold space. So for instance, and I love the concept of coming in, and it's almost like you're taking off your shoes, you're sitting down beside them, and it's not that you're becoming sad with them, but you're understanding that they are sad and you're coming alongside them to help them with it. So the key is, when we have what we call insecure attachment, it's because what our caregiver did changed the entire structure of our brain. So to have secure attachment, a child needs to have that exchange, that constant exchange. They need to know that their needs are met. They need to have people that can contain their big feelings and walk them through experiences.
Mhm.
So developmental trauma, or what we call insecure attachment, happens when children are left alone in a story that's unvoiced. or unknown. So if you think about, I was also a child of the 80s, you're not dating yourself. Okay. So, but basically, I use the example of when I was 5, I had a puppy and I threw the puppy towards the grass, thinking it was going to land on its feet like a kitten, and he hit the cement and it
Wow.
killed him. And so as a child, I was like, oh my gosh, I just killed my puppy. And so because it was traumatic, my mother went in to the veterinarian clinic and I was left standing there alone, knowing I had done this horrible thing. And so what happens is when we are left alone in a story where someone doesn't come beside us and say, sweetheart, this is not your fault. You had no idea
Of course.
that this would happen, right? And we will do that, but sometimes we don't get enough. So when I define developmental trauma, and then we'll go back to attunement, is the fact that someone didn't come beside you and give you enough of what you needed, right? So developmental trauma is not getting enough of the good things that we needed. Okay, so trauma as a whole, people think of it like PTSD, but what happens is we end up with, when we have developmental trauma, it's coming over a long span of time, right, as we're developing. And it's like 1,000 paper cuts over and over again. So it's the moments where we were belittled, ostracized, bullied, dismissed, right? We were put down, we were blamed when people started, or somebody told us lies, and shame told us lies and we believed them about ourselves, right? Those narratives, I'm too much. I wasn't really wanted. You know, the things that we then we go through life confirming it to ourselves, right? By the people we bring in and choose.
So evidence.
Yes, right. So, and then we're like, why do I keep dating jerks? Well, because I think I actually can't date anybody else that's not a jerk or whatever. Like, or why do I have friends that always take advantage of me? Right. So we've watched and had modeled to us how we receive love. So oftentimes with attunement, it's about what we call, and Fred Rogers called, looking and listening carefully, right? So we need an empathetic witness. As a child, we need someone to come up to us and say, I'm noticing that you're feeling this way. Is that true? How can I help you with that? So as I started working on my own insecure attachment, I had tons of behavioral addictions and I was tethering to people that were really bad for me. And it landed me in counseling. And I was like, why? After this many years of marriage to a great man with 2 beautiful boys, why am I sabotaging my life? And she said, you have insecure attachment. And so what we did is you can actually retrain the brain through experience. And so we went through the process of reattaching secure attachment to her first because she has it. So then we can borrow it from each other, right? We borrow secure attachment. Have you ever noticed you want to hang out with people who make your nervous system feel safe and good? It's the people that you resonate with. You will know when you're with someone who is healthy because they have boundaries, they're for themselves, they're not putting themselves down all the time. You feel better after you've been with them. I was referring to your interview with Tiffany, and she talked about how she always felt better after she was near you. And that is how people feel when they're hanging out with secure people, right? We make them better, right? So it's okay for us to have moments where we're struggling, but I think overall it's about really knowing that we are known and seen and loved. And so children oftentimes just need that attunement piece of coming in and sitting with them. And I talk about in the book that attunement is 2 things. It's verbal and nonverbal, right? So let's talk about the model of Fred Rogers. Those of us who grew up with him, he would attune to the camera as if he were speaking to one person. What do we know about eye contact? It's powerful, right? How many of us are distracted with our phones, or we're not really looking? How many of us have been at church and someone's looking all around you, but at you, right? And we're all guilty of it, right? I go down the street sometimes in the car and I watch people and everyone is on their phones, even the driver, which is scary, right?
That is scary.
There's a excuse me, there's a couple that's, in the car. They probably haven't seen each other all day, going to dinner or whatever, and they're not talking. She's going through Pinterest, whatever it might be. And I think that is really concerning, right? So looking. The other thing is, our body posture. When we are listening to someone, what does that look like? I'm leaning into you. I'm looking at you. I might be using my hand to touch you. So with children, I take a knee. which
Yeah.
Fred did every time as well, always getting below
Get
a
to their
child.
level. Yes.
Yes. And below them, because we love to stand over children and tell them what we think. And they're over it before we
Yeah.
even start, right? And I often will do that just so they know I'm absolutely focused on you. But also I teach kindergarten, so they're small, but it's the idea that like I would probably still do that now even more when I taught middle school, like really putting them down and sitting and leaning in and really making contact with them so they know no matter what, you are the most important person in the world to me. So my friend Tim Madigan wrote another book called I'm Proud of You, which was about his relationship and friendship with Fred Rogers, like the last 9 years of his life. And the first time he ever spoke to Fred on the phone, he said, Tim, do you want to know who the most important person in the world is to me? And he said, no, Mr. Rogers, who is it? And he said, it's Tim Madigan. Talking to Tim Madigan on the phone right now is the most important thing in the world to me. And it floored Tim because he was like, and Fred did that where he would really throw people off. Yes. But it's really about knowing that that person really knows you. And when we cultivate relationships with people, but especially children, where I think a bit like when they're coming in the morning and I'm saying hello to them, they will spill out the biggest things to me because they see my face and they know that is my person.
Yeah.
Right. And that is my person, just like we know our children's voices, they know us, like that is my teacher. And so when I see my teacher, I can tell her about my mom and dad fighting last night. I can tell her that my fish died. I can tell her that he spit on me in line. Like, and it's not just tattling, it's they have a burden. They have something they need to voice. And if they don't, it gets stuck. And what happens when things are stuck in us? It makes us sick. It gives us anxiety. And then we wonder why children are like freaking out with behaviors. It's because they don't have one person that just sits with them and just says, hey, you know, I've gotcha, right? I see you, right?
Yeah.
So that's the attunement piece. It's really about entering the emotional space of someone else. And it's not about feeling it for them. It's about understanding and empathizing. And how we empathize is remembering our own childhood. And if we can't do that, then that shows us where we need to heal.
I'm in love with you. I just
right.
love,
like,
I'm like,
yes, but I mean, like
I'm leaned in so
I'm in love
far.
with you too.
I'm leaned in so far. I've got like notes and notes. I love everything you just said about attunement because I think like, so I have a lot of different careers, but you know, part of this is the magazine, but also in a real estate brokerage and some other things. But before I did that, I did childcare. So I did childcare for 8 years. And it was so important to me to make sure every child felt heard and listened to and seen. And I worked with parents who were foster parents and kids in the system. And
foster kids are my favorite kids ever. Like if we get one in the school, I'm like, that one's mine. Like, I don't care how screwed up they are. Like and trauma kids are my bag. Like I am at home in trauma. Thank you, God, for that. Like, because things were so hard, I'm okay with hard. I'm not okay with fake. I'm not okay with shallow. And so based on my company is based on a quote from Fred Rogers. I flipped the words, but his was deep and simple is far more essential than shallow and complex. Ooh, I know, right? Yeah. So deep and simple is far more essential than shallow and complex. And what we do with children is we try to solve their symptoms instead of going to the wound, the heart. It's gross. It's gross how we try to, because we are uncomfortable with children.
Oh,
they are making us uncomfortable.
Like,
right?
why are you thinking these things? Oh, you don't have to worry about that. That's just the way life is. Like,
oh my gosh. So I took
all the things that society weighs on the children because the parents, and I'm guilty. I mean, we all have moments in our time that we have been, well, I won't say you, but
oh, I do. I told children that the sprinklers were cameras in my classroom, you know, and I taught like 100% poverty, and I was a total Scrooge McDuck when it came to Band-Aids, and I was mean, and I was like,
everyone needs a Band-Aid. I remember.
I know, girl. And what's interesting is I learned that Fred calls it body integrity. Like children are absolutely terrified when they see blood because they think they're not going to be okay. And so one of the classic hallmarks that I've learned now about it really attuning to children is just telling them the truth. So couple instances of that. One, a little girl in the middle of math was like, is Mr. Rogers dead? Because we watch him every day.
Oh.
And it was like crickets, like you would have heard like the record go, you know?
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, so here's that moment, right? Where I have to either be honest. And I was like, yes, he's dead. And then Chase was like, oh my God, yesterday, like they're not getting that right. So,
yeah.
but we talk about cancer. Yeah, he had cancer in his tummy. My grandma had cancer. Yes. But does everybody with cancer die? No, not everybody dies. During COVID, same thing. Like
Oh, I can't
COVID
imagine.
so COVID is an adult problem, is what I told them. People who love you will take care of you.
Mhm.
For my favorite one for like deadbeat parents and people that are being selfish is people come back. This is totally Fred. Like, and that's why I love it. People come back because they love you and they want to. So when they say, well, then why aren't they coming back? I say, because they're being selfish. And you
Mhm.
know what? You're an amazing human being and I would come back for you. Who else would come back for you no matter what that you know already right now?
Yeah.
Like
So
it
don't
is
feel
okay to be,
alone.
yes, and it's okay to be mad at your dad for that. Like
Mhm.
it's okay to have really big feelings about that. Now, we don't get to hit someone in the face because we're sad, but it's okay to yell, I'm angry. And Fred has one of my favorite songs he ever wrote is called The Truth Will Make Us Free. And it's all about, you know, what if I were sad and I never got it out? What if I were angry and I just pretended I wasn't angry? And he's like, I'm learning to say those things like I'm angry and I'm sad and I'm mad. And so every day we watch Mr. Rogers every day in
I
order.
love that.
Yeah, like we haven't missed it for like the last 4 years. Then and I'm friends with Mr. McFeely, David Newell. So he'll actually we'll let him know when we get to the 100th day. And then he sends us like speedy deliveries and things like that, which is really fun. But
Aw.
yeah, I know. But more than that, it's being open, or like having our heart open and our mind open to what we can learn. And the more that we do, less shallow and complex and more just real. Like we talk about it, we live it. Like there's days where I am super crabby or I don't like something they've done. And I'm like, oh, that makes me so angry. And they're like, but they know, like, and I always say, is there anything you can do that will not make me love you? Is there something you could do that would lose my love? No, nope. I cannot like your behavior and I don't teach babies or jerks. So if you're being one of those, I'm going to help you out with it.
Yes.
But that does not mean that that's who you are. It just means that you're struggling with that right now. Right. Like, so it just helps them know like that they're safe. When you're talking about emotional safety, when you're saying that about the children that were in your daycare, like the same thing,
Yeah.
knowing we're safe.
I think that, and that's so important. And, you know, I don't know everyone's spiritual background and everything, but I believe in God. And I think that if you, and I didn't come to God till later in my life, so I don't want to have the whole conversation. I don't want to take that time, but I think that knowing that God loves you regardless. And then if you don't have anybody else in your life, like you have a higher power, a spirit, a being, or whatever you want to call it, that no matter what mistakes you make, you're going to still have the unconditional love, because kids feel like their love is based on performance. And as now my children have grown up and they've always told me like, Mom, thank you for not trying to live through us. Thank you for not trying to make who you wish you were our path. Because I
It's
just
so
allow them
easy to
to be
do.
free. It is.
Yes.
And I just think that I see so many parents now who are missing out these great opportunities. Now that my kids are older, I'm like, oh, I want them to be little again. So
I
like
know. I have
my,
so
we
much
call them
regret.
like iPad kids. Like you don't want to deal with how they're feeling about after school, so you pass them the phone or the iPad as soon as they get in the car. And that used to be my favorite time, picking them up
I
from
know.
school
And
and saying, "What are 3 things you did today at school?" Like,
I know. And they're like, ah. And what's
but
so
if
funny,
they knew to have 3 things. So
they're like, okay, I need to have 3, so she'll leave me
I
alone.
ate lunch.
Yeah, exactly. I like sometimes I'm like, well, they're cute, they breathed. Like, cause like
Yeah,
there's times where I don't like them at all when I'm teaching
of
them
course.
because but I love them. Right. Like
Always.
so, and I think that's the thing is I guess what I've learned the most in my own journey, as well as working with Fred, and is the fact that it's such an incredible experience, but also such a huge honor to be able to be
Mhm.
part of a child's journey because we have no idea how important we are. And it wasn't until I went back into a story and that whole concept of story that goes with with my business, as well as what you do as well, and who people are and their story, your whole story. And if you look at it from a spiritual standpoint, I love the work of Dan Allender, and I feel like he says that our story is, it shows the gospel of God, is what he says. So basically, and I think that he says we need to study our own story, because we study everything, right? We study how we're going to lose weight, or we study how to, where to go for a meal when we go to a foreign country, or how we're going to, whatever it is, we study it, we learn it, we pin it, we blog about it, everything, but we never study our own story. We never look at the themes and the contours and the patterns and the things that have happened to us. Because before we even started recording, I said, I feel like for a long time as a child, I was a truth teller, and I didn't know why people got so angry about that. I would just silenced it. They took my voice away. They told me my voice was too big. They put me in the corner. They were like always saying I was too much or whatever. And then as I was doing a class through the Allender Center, they were asking about, identify a story from, like if you were thinking of pain points from 0 to 10, 10 being the most painful thing you've ever talked about, versus 1 being, I went to the grocery store once, like it's so minor. So they said, pick like a 4 or a 5. So I had really been thinking about how annoying it was when people would ask me, why did you become a teacher? And I'd be like, I have no idea, because I had scholarships for not dance. I'm not a dancer. That came out completely wrong, for drama and for singing. And so, one facet of like people wanted me to become an opera singer, and these ones wanted me to do Broadway. And then I was like, well, I'm going to be a teacher. And I had no idea why I said that. So I started going to these education classes, and it worked, and I was good at it. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I did it, but I had no idea. Like, I didn't have Oprah like saying, bring your favorite teacher on because she changed your life. And in fact, Crystal, I had so many crappy teachers.
Like, you're like, I want to be the change in this industry.
Right. And so people go into education for 2 reasons. 1 is they had great teachers and they want to give back. And 2, they want to redeem their childhood because they had some really crappy teachers. So as I started going back in time, I actually found a story that I ended up putting in the book about my 3rd grade teacher and how horrendous she was. And she was a bully, but in 2nd grade, I had hit my head in a car accident. And in the 80s, they didn't call it a brain injury. They called it, a delay, or she's slow, or but like my computation, my math skills and my fine motor went just to the tank. And I could not pass this deficit no matter what I did, like how much I went to tutoring or whatever, I could never get past it. And so as I went through and started putting this story back together, and I had to use context clues because, our brain is still learning and growing so much as children that we often will fill in the blanks with what we don't know. And that's why when we're left alone in story, we draw conclusions like, well, mom didn't want me, or dad didn't come back, and people are like, whoa, Crystal, that's not true, right?
Yeah.
Right. But we don't know as children. And if someone doesn't come alongside us, we're going to make up our reality. And especially if someone that we love is hurting us or letting us down, we're going to try to help ourselves survive that. And that's what our insecure attachment does, is it's how we survived as children emotionally. So if I come home and my voice is never wanted, or people tell me to be quiet, I'm going to learn to be very quiet and compliant and become a perfectionist in how I do things, because I need to make sure that I don't fail, right? So you see that in children. You see the same thing where a kid is always in my grill, constantly saying my name. They have anxious attachment because they need to know, is there something I can do that's going to make her not love me? And then the last one, which we've learned later when we've studied adverse childhood experiences, like you were talking about, growing up around violence, gangs, drug addiction, all of those kind of things. They're seeing that children from a really extreme adverse poverty or whatever it might be, but it doesn't always have to be demographics like poverty. It has to do with adverse childhood experiences. So those children can often end up with what we call disorganized attachment. And so what they do is they bounce between both avoidant and anxious because they don't know who they need to be safe, because things are so chaotic. So they either have been terrorized or the person they love is being terrorized in front of them. And so they can't make sense of so this is why you see children like the little boy that inspired my book. I call him Blue Eyes, and he's going to be a 5th grader. And he's like he's beautiful, but he's a total jerk, right? And so people are like, oh my God, he's so manipulative. And I'm like, but he has to be.
To
He had
survive.
to learn how to be street smart. His dad was selling drugs. His mom is screaming at him. She was being terrorized. So it's like he needed to know where he could go to be safe and who he needed to form an alliance with to survive,
Yeah. I
right?
would call it the chameleon. My friend and I
Oh,
talked about, being African American in a very
mm,
town with no diversity and having the jobs and roles we have. It's like you have to be a chameleon to survive. You have to
yes,
be safe, so you can't be too much this. You can't do this. Like
right.
I wore my hair straight, flat iron for years because whenever I would wear it curly, people would treat me a little different. I actually had a lady come up to me and it's like, "Oh, you just look so black today." I'm like, that's fun.
And that's the thing is, and
So
she probably didn't,
she
like,
couldn't,
and
she
it's
couldn't, she,
no,
it is
but
just like,
I haven't done that, but I've done other things that I'm just like, I can't believe but it's
like, I didn't mean to say that. And I know that
oh,
her
or like,
intentions were never negative, but I think she just didn't know how to articulate that I look very different than the way she's used to seeing me present myself.
yeah,
And because I know her intentions, I know her as a human. But I just thought to myself, it's like we have to find places when you've always felt like you don't fit in, or you're not good enough, or you're not worthy of the situation or the surroundings to kind of be a chameleon. Like I just want to like sit here so they see me, but I don't want to be in the front. And um,
I I've had times where I tried to, as silly as this is, I would try to like, I remember being in middle school where I'd walk down the hall and I was like, I'm not going to greet anybody to see if anybody greets me first, because I was always the one that would say hello to people or hug them first or whatever.
mhm.
And then I'd be sad when it didn't happen. Or I would go into a meeting and say, I'm just not going to talk. Right. I'm just going to be a listener, which is hilarious
Yeah,
because I
there's no
love to
way I
talk.
can do
And
that.
no. And
I think that
I
too,
would,
though. Yeah.
yes. And you're like, okay. And then they're like, who's going to present the poster? Crystal, Wisty. And I'm like, how do they know? Like, but it's our energy. And so it's almost like we try to hide
Mhm.
from our gifting. And so now I realize, going back to the story in third grade, I had a lady who was just blatantly bullying myself as well as other children in the classroom. And I had just hit my limit. And so I ended up just letting her have it and telling her she couldn't, like, I hate you. You can't talk to me like this. And it silenced her. And I realized, I mean, she was like, put your head down, I had to miss recess. All the kids like ran out to recess because they were like, she's going to die. Like they knew that like I was not going to be alive when they came back from recess.
Yeah.
Like this woman was so mean. But I remember watching her through my fingers, right? Because I'm supposed to have my head down on
Obviously.
my desk, and she could not, she was so mad. What's interesting about bullies is when we finally say enough to them, they don't know what to do, right?
They've been coasting on that fear all this time.
Right. But that is the moment, Crystal, where I became a teacher. I
Hmm.
was 9, but I didn't realize, because I had known my whole life that I was going to be one. It made complete sense when everybody was trying to put me in a different lane, that I was like, no, this is my lane. And I didn't even think about it. And so understanding that my understanding of who I was and my purpose and the themes of my life were actually locked in a story. And so
Mm.
that is what I believe about story, is that, and my hope and my prayer is that with my own business, that I will be able to do story groups with women where we can do something like this on Zoom, but we bring a story like, you look so black today. Like, I mean, that's a whole
Like,
story, right?
yeah.
I mean, but it's painful regardless of, like you said, I know her. And so what we do is we try to make it less painful by saying, I know her and I know she didn't intend it.
I,
No, it was just
but,
hurtful.
but I do
It
know
hurt.
that I straightened my hair for like 2 more years after that because
See what I mean?
I
Yeah,
reacted to that trauma. Like I reacted to
exactly.
that, like, oh, now, even though I've always been different, now they know that I'm different
Oh
because I'm
man.
looking different.
Right. And so it did change. It did change. And so that's what I want to do, is take those stories, especially when it comes to our parents. We feel
Hmm.
like we are betraying them, for us to be able to say it was abuse. It was not okay. It was wrong. It
Yeah.
hurt me when you, right? All of those things. I actually, as I healed my insecure attachment, had to emancipate myself off of my mother because we were so enmeshed. And what
Mm.
happens with children with anxious attachment is that we will often become enmeshed with our caregiver. So it's like a triangle, but it's a lopsided triangle. Instead of having the mother and the father, or the, the same sex couple or whatever, that the adults in the relationship, for them to actually have a deeper relationship than with the child, it gets imbalanced. And so that ends up parentifying the child and makes them like a little mini spouse. And what
Yes.
happens is then they feel super special because mom's telling me all her secrets, or dad takes me for
I know all
coffee,
the
and
adult conversations.
I get to stay there while all the ladies are gossiping in the bathroom at the party or whatever. And I feel so grown up. But what is it doing? It's robbing our innocence. And in fact, Dan Allender has a book called The Wounded Heart, where it's covert sexual abuse. And what happened is it lines us up, and it gets us primed for grooming. It gets us primed for promiscuity. It gets us primed for love and sex addiction, because we confuse intensity with love.
Oh, wow.
And what happens is the same chemicals in our brain are released when we are in pain and when we are in love. And so as a child, we cannot differentiate. I'm special most of the time, but then when my mom is distracted, she wants nothing to do with me. So what happens is I get into a relationship with a man, and he sometimes tells me he loves me and calls me back, and sometimes he doesn't call me for a week or two. Then we maybe comes back for a little sex, and then we go back. Like, see what we get in these cycles, and we think, but he loves me because I remember that at one point he love bombed me. Yes. So what it did for me is, with love and sex addiction, is I finally found my mother in a man. And so it activated that in my brain. So when things were not chaotic, they felt boring. So when I had what God wanted me to have, it was a good thing. I had a great marriage. I had great kids. I was depressed, obviously, with postpartum, but it wasn't bad. But I went out and sabotaged it because it felt wrong to my brain. So when you heal insecure attachment, life slows down.
Yes.
Big time.
You're not on this adrenaline jump.
Right. And our nervous system is like, we want to be parasympathetic, right? Like in the middle, but we either can go hyper aroused, where we're constantly in chaos looking, or we can go hypo, where we're sleeping all the time and Netflix binging and checking out when things get too hard. And so if we live in that perpetual state of like up there, it's going to feel really weird when we come back down here, which is where Fred lived, right? So that is what I'm trying to do with using the neighborhood with children, but I also do it for myself. I pull up a chair, I put my phone away, and I allow that to be a gift to myself, where I will literally sometimes be like, I'm so glad we have Fred because I'm losing it. And we sit down and I feel so much better afterwards, because it's a gift. Like, and we have to know how to regulate our system, right? And to get back to a place that's calm and grounded. But I was trying to parent from here and live from here forever.
Yes.
Right. So, I mean, there's a lot there. It's a lot to unpack, but I think really what it is it's looking and listening differently to our life, like looking and listening to the places where especially if we have anxious attachment, we want to stay 1% longer in every good thing we get, because we'll instantly be in the land of yes, but. So, I love you, but you're going to leave. I love you, but you didn't do everything exactly right. Or I love you, but it can't be like this forever. I love you, but you're going to die someday. Like, so you always think of, because that's what a child had to do. I would wake up in the morning and think to myself, what do I have to be excited for today? And if I didn't have something to be excited for, I was very worried, right? Because then it was like, I need to know what the next thing could be. So it's our way of training. Yeah.
You talk about the different type of attachment styles and stuff. And I know that we're going to put this link below, but tell us about your quiz that people can take to find out their attachment style.
Right. I think it's, how many of us take BuzzFeeds? Like, what Lord of the Rings?
I used to love a BuzzFeed.
And in fact, that is actually one of the quickest ways to get information, is through a quiz. So the quiz that I have on my website is what's your attachment style quiz. And what I tried to do is, because we're doing simple and deep and not shallow and complex, it takes the four, like if you think of attachments of children, you have secure, and then you have anxious, ambivalent, you have avoidant, And then you have disorganized, like I said, the child that's terrorized or being
Mhm.
or terrorizing. So what happens is, for the most part in this quiz, 60 seconds, you take it, we're going to give you a tentative score based on what I know of what you answer. So what it's going to do is it's going to give you a customized report, and it's going to tell you, hey, congratulations, you have, and they're based on Mr. Rogers. So you have a cardigan represents Mr. Rogers, right? You have anxious attachment, which is like Daniel Tiger. He's always worried about everything and very shy. Then you have Lady Elaine, who's the constant troublemaker with the boomerang, right? And then you have I think it's a crown, right? King Friday. So anyways, so
Well,
he's
while you're telling them about this, I'm going to do the 60-second
you're gonna
quiz.
take it? Awesome.
Yes,
So
hold on.
basically,
So
yeah. So
you keep telling them
yeah.
about it.
So what they do is you can actually read it if you want to. And it's basically just a really quick multiple choice quiz, and you'll get the customized report. And then what's really fun about that is that you can look into that a little bit more. And on my website, WysteriaEdwards.com, it is just a huge, hopefully, database of places where you can go, where I have free guides where you can download, the 10 best books that I believe that helped me write my book on attachment. Then there is the podcast. We have a Simple and Deep podcast where I talk about each of the styles. We'll be going more into avoidant and disorganized this season. But the ambivalent one there, as well as an overview of attachment. And then I also have a free course that people can take on the attachment styles of children, where it goes deeper. So this is really the foundation work of what I do, so that people will have an idea. So when I've presented this to teachers, I talk about most of the children that drive you absolutely crazy are going to be your exact opposite.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're also, or with Blue Eyes in my book, he was triggering my trauma back. So when we are stressed, we regress. Okay. So we can be secure, you and I, and then something happens. And all of a sudden, what happens when we're stressed or we're sad? We turn into children.
Yeah.
And we do things that we never, like we slam doors, or we do crazy things. And it's because what happens is it's the bottom of our brain. It's the very beginning of how we learned how to have conflict, or how to deal with anything that's hard. So that is what's going to happen. So if you go through the work of going through and repairing your attachment style, you can regress with certain people or certain situations. So he would trigger me. And so I had to recognize, like, my trauma brain, or the little girl inside that wants to come and fight for me, right? And be like, you can't treat me that way. I'm like, wait a second, I'm the wise adult now, and I can take care of that. So I talk to her a lot, like, it's okay, Wisty, I've got it. Because we have little soldiers, we have little girls inside us. So I have a picture of myself at 3 right here on my desk that's with me all the time. I've even put myself as I put myself as a screensaver when I was little on my phone, to remind myself, like, I carry this little girl with me, and now she's mine. She doesn't belong to anybody else, and she doesn't have to do anything to make anybody happy. She doesn't have to take care of any adults. She just needs to be little. And so that's what I try to do in my classroom, is like, are you 6? Yeah. Okay. Then I want you to work on being 6. And if you try to do my job, can you hand it back to me, please? And people are like, oh, you're dismissing. No, I'm not dismissing it. I'm giving you permission to be a child. Yes. And so I'm going to let you know that I've got the big things, so that you don't have to worry, because they don't know how to play. We strip away the idea of playing, imagination, like you talk about. They don't have it, because they're so worried.
And they're overstimulated. Like,
yeah, we have a little girl I know that's coming to my class this year that her mom said she's a twin, and she's like, she is a micromanager of her brother. And I said, okay, good, I'm on it. And so we'll be talking a lot about the freedom of loving somebody, but not having to make all the choices for them. And, like, loving someone, but allowing them autonomy, like he has his own life, and he can have his own friends, and you're such a great big sister. If maybe it's like 5 minutes earlier, right?
Yeah, of course.
But it's the idea that actually imprisons both of them. If it becomes an unhealthy dynamic. She said she does all the talking for him, and I'm like, he has to learn to speak for himself, like giving kids voice. Did you get it? Did you get your score?
I did.
What does it say?
Well, I thought we were gonna guess. No, I'm sure.
I have a feeling I know what it is. What does it say?
Triple A. So
Triple A. Oh, so you had a tiny bit of anxious attachment come out while you were taking it.
I guess so.
But overall, I think that you're much more secure than you think you are.
Oh yeah. There was questions about, my mom and childhood. So
Yeah, you're like, okay.
we've done a lot of healing and work since then. But what you talked about before, like feeling guilty sharing your life story because how it may impact someone else's. And that's it. That's a hard one. Like that's
super hard.
But truth is truth always. So
it's so hard. And that's the thing is we have to, okay, so I guess when we talk about moms, they say, well, I didn't mean for that to happen. I was doing the best job I knew how to do. And I'm like, yeah, but there are some times where we're just selfish, or sometimes where we just didn't make nice choices, and sometimes I just say, but that's not how I felt during that moment. And I think the body keeps the score in the sense that we feel all of our nervous system is recording right through life. And that's why when we smell a cologne or we hear a song or whatever, our senses bring things back to us. And so I think how you felt in a moment needs to be more important than the intention of the moment, because we get lost in people's intentions all the time, or I fall in love with intention, which you probably do too, because as an anxious, but you know what? Anxious attached people are the quicker out of all of the different ones to gain secure attachment, because we are always looking for solutions and we're always thinking about other people, and we see how we affect other people and how they affect us. So now if you're an avoidant, it's going to be a little harder to recognize there's a problem and now I need to seek help with it. I'm married to an avoidant and he's a scientist, and he's like, last night I was trying to explain to him, your face is telling me different. And he's like, I'm fine. And I'm like, yeah, tell your face, tell your body. I bet you anything, Crystal, you're an amazeballs when it comes to reading people's body language,
body
right?
language is, definitely.
As we have to be, as avoidant, as anxious and ambivalent children, we have to know what's going to happen next. And I was my mother's emotional caregiver, so I needed to make sure my mother was okay. Yeah. Because if she wasn't, it wasn't going to be fun, right?
Not good for anyone. Yeah, exactly.
So that is why, but that is now our superpower. Right. So it makes us really good at attuning to other people, but then we have to learn how to have the boundary to not jump in with them and feel everything they feel. And boundaries feel mean when we first get them. They feel wrong, right? They feel like we're going against every fiber in our being, especially when it's our mother. So I have said to my mom, like, you have the capability of derailing me faster than anybody in the whole world because I lived in your body. Yeah. Like we lived inside, and even if we were adopted, they are our caregiver.
Yes. Yeah.
And so they are going to trigger you. You can be doing so great, and then Christmas is a complete crap show. And you know why? Because she's there and you're regulating to it. So like you have to know that is okay, and that makes sense. Does that make
it makes a lot of sense.
Words, it makes sense, are so freeing to me, because I'm like, okay. And it's not going to be solved. Yeah. So it's so much easier to deal with other people's children at school. My own children drive me. I'm like, oh my God. Like my therapist once told me, every time your child struggles does not mean because you were an addict once or you weren't a good mother. And I'm like, whoa. Right.
We go so extreme with whatever the answer is. It has to be the most extreme answer, instead of just saying, hey, they just had an off day. They have friend problems or whatever their case is that they're acting.
It's all because of me, which is super egocentric and super childlike, right?
Yeah, very
so
much
when we have very childlike reactions to things, it's a red flag. That is a wound. Like that is a wound. When you are reacting from a place where there was times where my principal's like, Wisty, you are so abrasive when XYZ happens. And I'm like, abrasive? I'm just being opinionated. I'm just telling you. And she's like, but it's so up here. And I'm like, well, then it's showing me that is triggering a childhood wound. And so I've had to learn to be really, really curious and ask myself why. But to sit with those uncomfortable feelings is part of that journey of learning that it's okay for me to feel like crap right now and know that it's not going to last forever, and to just feel whatever I feel. And sometimes it's the safety of my car, right?
Yeah.
Or my classroom. And I ask myself, what is really going on here? What am I really feeling? And so with my husband, I've had to give him a feelings wheel and be like, pick one. Because avoidant children, they turn off that ability to label how they feel because they're not allowed to feel anything.
Yes.
So what they do is they just stop growing in that area. So oftentimes they can't tell you how they feel. And
They
so
just
their
don't even
classic,
know. Yeah.
that's going to be the classic example. When someone says, how do you feel? They're going to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I used to be like, that should be a drinking game, Matt, because my husband says it all the time. And I'm like, or maybe I get $1 for every time you said it because it's driving me crazy. But he literally does not have the vocabulary to tell me how he feels because it was not welcome.
Mm.
It was not safe for him to tell how he felt because he lived with people that would explode at him. Right. And so, and what's interesting too, that we've identified is he has a mother that is like, there's no volume control. Like it's always like she's yelling regardless of what she's saying. And so whenever I get excited and my pitch goes up, he says, stop yelling. And I'm like, I'm not yelling.
Like, I'm just
But
telling you a story. I'm
right,
excited.
but he's exactly, but he says, stop yelling. You're yelling at me. And so we have to recognize that's a trigger. And so so knowing, it was game changing for me to find out about attachment because it's the first wound our first heartbreak we ever have. And we all have attachment. So all adversity, all violence, all of it can be traced back to broken attachment, broken relationship, broken connection to ourselves, to our caregivers, and to God, if you look at it from that sense. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Again,
It does. It
so
does.
Fred Rogers had insecure attachment. He was an avoidant. He died of stomach cancer.
Mm.
And that tells you what happens. We swallow our feelings. We don't say how we feel. It
Least of
kills us.
disease. Yes.
His mentor, Margaret McFarland, she also died of stomach cancer. So you look at that and you go, okay, we need to start talking about the things about who we really are. But it's such hard work, but it's such meaningful work because this is how we stop things like intergenerational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because we are passing so much stuff. Like, what is it? Like 2% of our DNA is coded, and the rest of it is like all this epigenetics now. And so we're passing on even like startle responses and, developmental trauma. They can look at it now and see it. So it's like, we are passing this. And unless we choose to be the person that stops it and we heal it, I've had to go to my own children and say, tell me that I failed you. And my oldest was like, I can't do it. And I was like, just say it, because stories need to be named. They need to be pondered. They need to be articulated, and then we can bless them.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying, oh, I'm so glad it happened, but now because this happened, I can read a room.
You've
Because
got to
this
recognize it. Yeah.
Yeah, because this, and it's not just, whatever, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. God won't give us more than it's not, I don't even go into like platitudes or spiritualizing it. It's really about, we have to understand who we are if we really want to show up in life and do what we really want to do. And otherwise we start acting like everybody else. And that's not what we're meant to do. We're not meant to be straightening our hair. Look at your beautiful curls.
Yeah,
Like,
we're meant to have our own individual journey and purpose.
yes.
And I agree. I think that's the biggest key that people don't want to do the work to because it's hard. They don't want
It's
to
so
ask
hard.
the why. It's like, well, why am I acting like this? And then ask another why. Well, why is that? And then why is that? And why is that? And getting down to the root of things.
Yes. But the
And
thing is, it doesn't have to be so overwhelming. If you do it with people who love you or people that have been there before you.
Yes.
You can only lead
Generational
someone as far as.
curses, yeah, because generational curses can only be broke with truth and light, I think.
I
And
believe
so
that too.
I look at my family and all the secrets and the things, I'm like, I won't do that. Like I don't participate in a narrative that does not move me forward. And
That's beautiful.
so I think that's really
You
important.
can rewrite it. So you're rewriting it.
Every day.
And that's the good news. Our brain is plastic. It can be molded by experience, but it's like, I always think of like neural pathways, like almost like the ruts that they would have made with the wagon trains. Like they're so deep and you can still see them right now. They look like almost like caverns, right? But it's the thing is that you can retrain the brain. And I know this because I did it. I remember when I crawled into counseling and I was an absolute disaster. I was fragmented. The thing that happens with trauma is that it's like we have a narrative of our life and trauma comes in and like cuts it in pieces. And so a part of us as a child or whatever age we were, 20, 24, 4, it gets left there. And so what we do is we get to go back in our mind and through our work and we get to scoop that child up, just like I did in my journey. I got to go back to a veterinarian clinic, get down on my knees like I would with a kindergartner, because that's how old I was, and say, sweetheart, it's not your fault that this happened. Your mom and dad were warned that you were too little, right? Like you shouldn't have been alone with your puppy. It wasn't okay, right? And what's interesting is when we go back and we try to ask people about these stories, people are going to say, well, you did it. You'll be amazed at the excuses people will make to keep
everyone
stuck,
has
right?
excuses. Yeah.
But what you do is you tell yourself the truth. And sometimes it's not about convincing other people. It's knowing what was really true. That's the hardest part, is then you grieve what you didn't get or you grieve what you lost. But then there's something really powerful about, and I've seen it every time it happens with children in my care, and I'm sure you saw it too, that once we know the truth, we just can be at peace because there's no more questions.
Yeah.
It's the ambiguity, right? That is scary. The not knowing is scarier than the knowing.
Yeah.
So,
I love it. Where can people find you if they want to look you up online? And then I'm going to put the link to the quiz below. I'm super excited. I'm going to watch the video and the report later. And think,
yes, please do.
I might try it again too when I'm in a different headspace. And
you're trying to get you're trying to get your cardigan. And I know you got a cardigan. I'm not too worried, but the thing is that our attachment style isn't good or bad. It's not right or wrong, which is it's the anxiety, like, oh no, I want it to be good.
I mean, it just look bad.
That's the thing is, and I got to the point where I was like, oh, well, if you're not secure, then but I'm like, oh gosh, let's not do that, because that's what makes us beautiful and unique. But anyway, so it's Wysteria Edwards, and it's not phonetic, so you do Wysteria Edwards EDWARDS.com. I was like, what was I saying again? And then when you get to the page at the very top, there's a attachment style quiz. You can take it there. And then there's links to the book. Again, Waiting for Mr. Rogers is releasing everywhere books are sold. And please support your independent bookstores. Very important. I know we all use the Amazon Buy Now link, which is awesome. But if you have a bookstore that you absolutely love, please ask them to order it, because we want to keep brick and mortar places in business. Definitely. And so definitely ask about that. Also, it's not just for teachers. That is a misnomer that I want to clarify. It does say teaching with attachment and attunement and intention, but we are all foster parents. Yeah, we are all caregivers. Yes. And so the thing is that, yes, you could buy it for a teacher, but it's also for the child you were. And to redeem those experiences and to see where perhaps you might have holes in your emotional healing. So there's also a larger attachment style quiz that's in the book from one of my favorite authors as well as teachers, Diane Poole Feller, and she has great work as well on the power of attachment. So there's just so much. But yes, the book also has, photos of Fred that most people haven't seen. And just, it's kind of my journey along the way of this little boy that came in and I had no idea what to do. So I just thought, I'm going to show Mr. Rogers, because that's all we had, right? As kids, I was like, and luckily I found the Crayola Crayon episode and put it on, and it literally started to rewire his brain. And then looking back, Fred was at the very beginning of attachment theory. So now it's like stepping into his footsteps and walking and showing. I was able to say to Mr. McFeely, he was right the whole time, so That's why we cry when we see him, because as children, he told us that he loved us and we just believed it.
Mhm.
And
And
that
he's probably
is
some people, the only person that ever told them that.
right.
Oh,
And lots of children would write to him, telling him about how they were being sexually abused or they were neglected. And he was that place. Yes, I see that. Like, we all have our moment with him, and he was very honored by that. But he was like, I don't know every child, but you do. You
yeah.
are with those children. You are the opportunity to tell a child that they matter. You might be the only person that ever apologizes to a child
Yeah.
as an adult, right? So it's an incredible opportunity. And so my goal and my hope is that people would read it and feel, one, they'd feel loved, but also that they would know that it's not complicated. And what you needed as a child is the same thing children need now.
Yes.
It has not changed. Fred said the outside world around children has changed, but the inside has never changed. And so I think we have just really lost our way. And so this is my hope, is that through intentional work that we're able to get back to a good place. So yes, and I know you're going to probably take that quiz a bunch of times, so I'll see your name pop up.
No, I'm
But
gonna,
yeah,
you know what? I'm gonna resonate with it. I'm gonna sit and think about it. And
yeah,
I'm actually gonna do what you said. I'm gonna get a picture of me as a child and give her permission to have feelings, all the feelings that she
yes.
felt as a child. Because
Journal
I
to
think,
her. I've put her, like, she's, yeah, like I can show you, but like, it's just little.
oh, I love it.
And also, if you know of an age that you were wounded, something horrible happened, find a picture of yourself at that age and
Yeah.
take that picture with you. Put that picture in your wallet, put that picture on your phone, and allow yourself the opportunity to love that child. And you
Yeah.
might see it as a separate person for a while, but give her a pet name. I call my little Wisty baby girl. And so I journal to her. Another really cool exercise that you can do is write to your child in your dominant hand and
Mm.
then allow them to answer you in your other one. And
Oh,
what
that's
happens
pretty
is
cool.
it's cool. It taps into your subconscious, and you'll actually have them telling you things. So it looks kind of weird because it's so primitive,
Yes.
but allow it to be what it is. God has really shown up in these places for me, if I'm just willing. And it might feel weird, but I truly believe that our brain is trying to make sense. That's why we rehash things over and over again, is our brain is trying to make sense out of the trauma that happened. And so we go back in our brain, and with people that, can help us and guide us, great physicians, great therapists, and find, if you are wanting to do this kind of work, finding people that are very skilled in like EMDR, lifespan integration, developmental childhood trauma, because it's not going to happen in talk therapy. It's not
Yeah.
going to happen with just your pastor. As great as that idea is, it needs to be someone who truly understands the neuroplasticity of the brain and what needs to happen to break those patterns for you and that mindset, as well as, DBT
Yeah.
strategies and things like that, behavior strategies of knowing what to do when you are triggered and how
Mhm.
you can soothe yourself and all of those things. And so that's what I'm in the process of putting together, is kind of a wellness store or site to come to, where it's like, okay, I've got anxiety. What other bells and whistles could I possibly do? Right. Or
I love
what,
that.
but all of us have different things. So trying to collect, like, okay, Crystal, what works for you and what works for,
Mhm.
because it's not just one thing, and we have to stop thinking it's just one way.
Keep thinking everything's a one-stop shop and it's not.
No, it's a healing journey. But yes, finding a picture of yourself, I think, is a really great step in the journey. So
Well, thank you so much for being our guest today. And I'm gonna make sure to include your
absolutely.
link. Hopefully everyone will take the quiz. Curious to
Yes,
see
I
what everyone
know.
comes up
You're
as.
gonna make your
And
husband take it, I'm sure. Yeah, I know.
yeah, so he's the most
60
secure,
seconds.
not attached person in the world. Like he's
Well,
very emotionally secure.
oh,
So
really? It'll be interesting to see what he does. And I think the hard thing with quizzes sometimes is you're like, I know what I should be putting, but I'm gonna put the
yeah.
real answer.
Well,
So
that's kind of where I was at. Like, should I say that? No. You want to trick the quiz to get the
you
results
can
you
trick the quiz and get the cardigan if you want, but whether or not you really got the cardigan,
want.
girl.
Exactly. If you earned it or
So it was
not.
so lovely to meet you and to
Me
be
too.
here. And Yes, absolutely. And please feel free to reach out in any way, your listeners as well as yourself, if you have questions, and if I don't have the answers, I will definitely point you on to people who do. But it's just a
Appreciate it.
journey. It's an
Yeah.
opportunity, right? So
Well, I
thank you so
appreciate you
much.
so much. Thank you.
Welcome. My pleasure.